All right, so Congressman Ro Khanna is in the news, and it's because he released a 5-point plan to crack down on corruption. So I love this. Let's go ahead and go. We'll go one by one through each of the proposals here, and we'll break it down for everybody. So here's what they say in Huffington Post, by the way, written by Daniel Marins, who does a phenomenal job. Representative Ro Khanna wants Democrats to do more to curb political corruption, and he believes that President Joe Biden's reelection could depend on it. If the president is wondering where to start, the Silicon Valley Progressive introduced what he's calling his 5-point comprehensive political reform platform on Friday. Khanna proposes banning candidates for federal office from receiving donations from lobbyists or political action committees of any kind, banning members of Congress from trading stocks. All right, let's pause here for a second. So the idea of banning lobbyists or PACs or super PACs, candidates from taking any of that stuff, I 100% support it. I do fear, though, that would just get struck down by the court, like all other attempts at campaign finance reform have effectively been slapped down by the court. There's been a number of Supreme Court cases going all the way back to the 1970s, which have kind of reaffirmed the idea that political bribery is free speech. And so I think that this probably would get slapped down by the courts. But then that raises the question, like, what's the way we get the change we need on this front? I mean, a constitutional amendment is the most direct path to it, where you do a constitutional amendment. You basically ban private money from politics, and you have what's called clean elections, which is public financing of elections. It's what I wrote my college thesis on, was this idea of clean elections. I agree with his proposal. I just fear like it's kind of dead on arrival. But still, I respect the fact that he's going for it, right? Okay, so he continues here and says, banning members of Congress from trading stocks. That is a no-brainer, and that polls at like 80 or 90%. And by the way, some people might point out Representative Ro Khanna is a little bit of a hypocrite on this because his wife is trading, and, so there's some things that are up in the air around that. But hey, at least he's saying, let's ban it. Let's stop it completely. Totally agree with that. Limiting Supreme Court appointees to 18-year terms. I would say definitely better than nothing, but I would probably do like 10-year terms. I would do less than 18. Imposing 12-year term limits on members of Congress. See, this one I'm a little more torn on because, look, I understand the logic behind term limits, but at the same time, I think sometimes they're proposed as a panacea, but they're not really. They're actually definitionally anti-democratic, right? Like, in theory, you could have a politician that everybody loves, is always doing the right thing, and then it's like, hey, sorry, we're going to kick your ass out after X number of years. Now, so they are anti-democratic, but there is the benefit that you could kind of prevent anybody from having a political position for life. If you think of, like, if we didn't have term limits for president, I would genuinely be afraid of somebody like Trump. I mean, Trump already tried to steal the election, but I'd be afraid of somebody like sitting in there and saying, I'm not leaving. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, everybody's got to get out after 8 years. So I see both sides of the term limit debate. I would just say it's not my go-to solution for anything because, again, as we all know, if you have term limits for every government position, but you still have big money from corporations and billionaires controlling our politicians, it doesn't matter that they're term limited. They will just do bad things in the shorter time frame, right? Like that. So it's not really the end all be all. But having said that, okay, so it's 12-year term limits for members of Congress and requiring federal judges and Supreme Court justices to adhere to a new and more robust code of ethics. Look, this is probably one of the most important ones. I would say the most important ones are banning congresspeople from trading stocks. That's a no-brainer, and I think that would stand legal tests. And this one, I think, is a no-brainer. And I think it's definitely allowed under the Constitution, but I fear maybe the Supreme Court would slap it down. But it's crazy, like the Supreme Court to rule on something involving them. It's like, no, they are supposed to be regulated by Congress. That is in the Constitution. So just so you understand, every court has a code of ethics that they have to abide by, except one, the Supreme Court. And guess what? That's why we get all these articles now where it's like, Clarence Thomas was on this asshole's super yacht and went to this billionaire's house and jacked him off and had this billionaire at his daughter's wedding, or like how many, and it's not just Clarence Thomas. We pick on him because his is the most brazen, right? But like, it's virtually all of them were doing these horribly corrupting things and just getting gifts out of nowhere. And like, of course, this is the way it works. So now, if these billionaires have a case in front of the court, what do you think is going to happen? The justices don't recuse themselves, and they rule with them like every time. So I think that's a no-brainer, the having a code of ethics. I mean, I would imagine if you ask the American people, they would almost certainly think, oh, they already have a code of ethics. No, they don't. The Supreme Court is just a group of unelected judicial tyrants and judicial supremacists who are activists in their own respect. They're deeply political, and they overreach and override Congress and the executive branch all the time. In some instances, you could say they make the right decision, but in the majority of instances, they don't. And so I have a big problem with the Supreme Court not having a code of ethics. I hope they get a code of ethics, and he's trying to do it. Ro Khanna's trying to do it. So, look, much credit to Ro Khanna on this stuff. I'm not 100% with him on every provision, but in totality, is this a net positive or a net negative? It's definitely a net positive. And thankfully, there's some congressperson out there who cares about corruption and is fighting on corruption. So, again, credit to him. I hope at least some of these things get through. All right, guys. That's the show, y'all. That's the show. I love y'all very much, as always. Thank you for listening to me babble. Everybody do me a big favor. Click like, click subscribe, all that fun stuff. Click that bell icon so you get a notification every single time a video drops. I would deeply, deeply appreciate that. Still desperately trying to stay ahead of my wife in the sub count number. I think I'm on borrowed time. But listen, you guys can keep me ahead. I will say this. There's a large percentage of you, probably tens of thousands of people who watch this channel, maybe even hundreds of thousands, who don't subscribe. So, it helps me out, costs you nothing. So just consider, if you watch the channel, just consider clicking that sub button. It helps me out a lot. So that's all I got for you. Much love to everybody who supports this show on Patreon. If you'd like to do that, link in the video description box below. And much love to everybody who supports Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. This week we have Andrew Yang coming on. And it should be interesting and fun. It'll probably be a debate at a certain point. So I hope everybody checks that out. And you can support Crystal Kyle and Friends. The link's below. Remember, you can sign up for free, and then you get the audio podcast version, and you get it a day later on Saturdays, or you can sign up, pay $5 a month, and you get the video of every interview and debate, and you get it a day early. And remember, we don't talk to any advertisers. We've never done an ad read. We've never even took a meeting with a corporation or an advertiser or any money interests. It's all, you guys fund it all. So much love again to everybody who supports us. I appreciate you, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.